This section isn't for people like you." The words landed before Cormac Slade had time to look up. He had been sitting for less than 10 seconds, folder on his knee, appointment on the schedule, a streak of joint compound on his left cuff that he hadn't noticed until now. The leather chair beneath him was the kind that cost more than he made in a week. He hadn't thought twice about sitting in it. Wendell Price stood 2 feet away and didn't bother lowering his voice. That was the point. The voice was never just for the person it was aimed at. Price wasn't pointing to another seat. He was pointing to the side door, the one without a handle on the outside. The one marked for staff and service. Somewhere behind him, a man murmured something to the person beside him, something about the flannel shirt, the worn boots, and a quiet laugh followed that nobody bothered to conceal. Cormac stood. No argument, no explanation. He picked up his folder and turned toward the door, the way a man turns when he has learned that words cost more than they return. His hand reached the door. Then heels slow, even, unhurried, crossed the marble from the main entrance, not rushing, not announcing, just arriving. Nobody turned immediately, but everybody knew. Cormac's hand was still on the door when the voice came from behind him. Cormac Slade. Not a question, not a greeting. A name spoken by someone who had been looking for it for a long time. He stopped. The room stopped with him, because the woman who had just said his name was the only person in this building who already knew exactly who he was. October 14th, 2022, 9:17 in the evening. The Carver Club had 300 guests that night. Nashville's version of important, dressed in the Nashville version of understated wealth. The gala was Voss Meridian Hospitality's annual event, the kind that required a venue with a reputation, staff who moved like water, and a climate control system that never, under any circumstances, failed. The system failed at 9:17, not dramatically, not all at once. First, the temperature in the main ballroom climbed 2 degrees. Then 4. The kitchen staff noticed the walk-in coolers cycling too fast. By 9:40, the servers were sweating through their jackets, and the guests had stopped pretending they weren't. Wendell Price made one call, the on-call list for subcontracted maintenance. One name was still available that night. Cormac Slade answered on the second ring. He was at the Carver Club by 10:15, led through the side entrance, the one without a handle on the outside, and down to the mechanical room in the basement. No one introduced him. No one told him how long he had. He looked at the system for 4 minutes, then opened his toolkit and got to work. He worked alone for 4 hours. The ballroom above him hummed with voices and string music and the careful laughter of people who were paid to seem at ease. Cormac heard none of it. He heard pressure gauges and valve tolerances and the specific pitch of a compressor running outside its rated range. At 1:12 in the morning, the system came back online. He wrote his technical report by flashlight at the workbench, 12 pages, precise, with a single flagged recommendation at the end. The pressure relief valve assembly needed full replacement. Not repair. Replacement. The current units were running at the outer edge of their rated capacity, and the failure tonight had accelerated their degradation. He signed his name. He left the report on the workbench and drove home before the sun came up. No one shook his hand. No one asked his name. 2 years and 14 days later, Britta Voss set that same report on a conference table in the Carver Club's third-floor meeting room and watched Wendell Price's left hand close into a fist. She had found it during routine due diligence, a document pull before Voss Meridian decided whether to renew their venue contract for another 3 years. Most of what she found was standard: maintenance logs, inspection certificates, catering invoices. But one file had been misfiled in the physical archive, sandwiched between 2 years of linen inventory records. 12 pages. Technical language. A signature at the bottom. C. Slade, HVAC technician. She read the flagged recommendation twice. Then she read the date. Then she looked at the maintenance log for the months that followed, where the pressure relief assembly was recorded as inspected and cleared, no replacement recommended. "I'd like to speak with the technician who wrote this report," she said. Price's voice was even. "That contractor isn't in our current system. Then I'd like to know how to find him. He said he would look into it." She closed her notebook. The meeting ended 12 minutes later. In the parking lot across the street, Cormac Slade sat in his truck with a cold cup of coffee on the dashboard. A Chicago number had called twice while he was inside. He looked at it for a long moment, then set the phone aside and watched the building. He didn't know yet that someone inside it was looking for him. After Price left the conference room, Britta stayed. She didn't have a reason she could have easily explained, not a professional one. She had a meeting in Chicago the next morning and a car service booked for 6:45. Staying made no logistical sense, but she walked to the front desk and found Dottie Crane, who had worked the lobby of the Carver Club for 7 years, and who greeted Britta the same way she greeted everyone, with steady eyes, and the particular stillness of someone who had seen a great deal and chosen to say very little of it. "The technician who came the night of the 2022 gala," Britta said. "The one who fixed the cooling system. Do you remember him?" "I remember him," Dottie said. She didn't hesitate, which Britta noted. "Do you have a way to reach him?" "Not in any system you'd find." Dottie opened the bottom drawer of her desk and pulled out a small spiral-bound address book with a worn cover, the kind no one kept anymore, which was precisely why it still had information that the digital systems did not. She turned to a page near the middle and wrote a number on a slip of paper. He stayed until almost 2 in the morning. Didn't eat anything. Didn't complain about anything. Left the report on the workbench and walked himself out. Britta took the slip of paper. "Thank you, Dottie. He was good at what he did," Dottie said, which Britta understood was not a small thing for Dottie to say. She called from the lobby. No answer. She called again from the elevator. 4 rings. Then a man's voice, careful, unhurried. The voice of someone who had learned to be deliberate with words before spending them. "This is Cormac." She gave her name and her company. A pause on the line. 3 seconds, maybe 4. "I remember that night," he said. "What do you need?" She asked to meet. The Carver Club, the following morning, if he was available. There was a brief silence on his end that she had trouble reading, not reluctance, not eagerness. More like someone considering a thing from several angles before answering. He was quiet for a moment. "You know I got walked out of your lobby this morning." "I know," she said. "I was standing at the door." Another pause. "Longer this time." "You saw that," he said. It was not quite a question. "I stayed 2 hours after my meeting ended to find your phone number," she said. "So, yes." He said he would be there at 9. He did not say anything else before he hung up, which she appreciated. After she set the phone down, she stood in the lobby for a long moment. Through the tall windows, she could see the parking lot across the street. A truck was still there, the same one she had noticed on her way in, parked at an angle in the far corner like someone who had not planned to stay. She watched it pull out slowly and merge into the evening traffic on 5th Avenue South and disappear. She thought about a man working alone in a basement for 4 hours, while 300 people stood above him, and never once wondered who was keeping the lights on. She thought about the fact that she had been one of those 300 people. She thought about standing at a podium and smiling at a room full of guests and making the decision to carry on, because someone, somewhere, was handling it. She had not known who. She had not asked. She did not sleep particularly well that night. The next morning, Cormac drove to the Carver Club in a white button-down shirt. No tools, no folder of quote sheets. He parked in the public lot across the street and walked in through the main entrance. Dottie was at the front desk. She looked at him, looked at the shirt, and said only, "Room 2, down the hall, second door on the left." Britta Voss was already there. 2 cups of coffee on the table, one on each side. A folder open in front of her. She stood when he came in, which he hadn't expected, and did not extend her hand in the way that suggested she was measuring him. She just said, "Thank you for coming." He sat. She sat. She opened the folder and pushed it toward him. The report you wrote. This line. She pointed to the flagged recommendation on page 11. He read it. He had written it. He remembered writing it, the specific wording he had chosen, because he wanted it unambiguous, the kind of language that could not be softened in retrospect. Price turned it down, he said. I know. Do you have documentation of that decision? He looked at her steadily. Email. He sent the rejection in writing. Cost, reason. A pause. I kept a copy, because I keep everything. Old habit, from the engineering days. Something shifted in her expression. Not quite relief, more like confirmation of something she had already suspected, but needed to hear stated plainly by someone who had been present. What kind of engineering? She asked. Mechanical systems, HVAC design mostly, toward the end. Before that, broader commercial work. She looked at the report in front of her, then at him. This is not how a service technician writes a report. No, he said. It isn't. She did not press further. She didn't need to. They talked for 40 minutes. It was a direct conversation, no deflection on either side, no positioning. He had the documentation. She needed to see it before she could make any decision about the contract renewal. The conversation had a practical purpose, and they kept to it, and somewhere inside that practicality, something else was quietly taking shape that neither of them named. At some point, Price passed by the window in the hallway. He slowed when he saw them. His eyes moved from Cormac to Britta and back again, settling on Cormac, with an expression that was not quite anger, and not quite surprise, something more controlled than either, the expression of a man doing rapid and private calculation. Then he kept walking without stopping. Cormac watched him go. Britta watched Cormac watch him. Voss Meridian is opening a contractor review process for technical systems work at 3 new venues, Britta said, just before she stood. I'd like you to submit a file. Cormac looked at her. Are you talking to me, or to the name on that report? She held his gaze for a moment. The question was fair, and she knew it. She capped her pen, closed the folder, and did not answer it. Not yet. He drove home afterward, and stood in the kitchen for a while doing nothing in particular. The question he had asked her, and the fact that she hadn't answered it, stayed with him longer than he expected it to. Then he went to the closet in the back bedroom, the one he'd been using for storage, since Jasper moved into the larger room 2 years ago, and pulled out a cardboard box he hadn't opened since the summer before. Last. It was heavier than he remembered. He carried it to the kitchen table and lifted the lid. Inside, project binders from Slade Engineering, 12 of them, labeled by client and date, site drawings, correspondence files, a folder labeled Contracts Active that had stopped being accurate in March of 2019. He stood at the table and thought about Dana. She had been a history teacher at a public school in Germantown. She drove a 10-year-old Civic she refused to replace because it still ran fine, and she did not believe in buying things that still ran fine. She had a habit of reading the last page of a book before she started it, which drove Cormac quietly insane, and she laughed every time he brought it up, which he somehow found worse and also better. She died on a Tuesday in March, coming home from an in-service day, when a driver ran a red light at an intersection on Gallatin Avenue. The paramedics arrived within 6 minutes. It was not enough. Cormac closed the engineering firm 3 months later. He had a 7-year-old son, a mortgage, and no particular interest in sitting under fluorescent lights, thinking about load calculations for a building he would never see. He took a job with a commercial HVAC service company the following spring. He was good at it immediately, which surprised no one who had known him before, and surprised everyone who met him after. He didn't explain the gap. He didn't feel he owed anyone an explanation. He found the manila envelope at the bottom of the box. Carver Club, October 2022 inches, his own handwriting on the tab. Inside, a copy of his technical report and, behind it, a printed email from Wendell Price dated October 19, 2022, 5 days after the gala. The email was brief. It acknowledged the report and declined the valve replacement recommendation on grounds of cost. Price's full name and title were at the bottom. Cormac photographed both documents with his phone. He saved them to his cloud drive and as a local backup. He put the originals back in the envelope, and the envelope back in the box and closed the lid. He was still at the kitchen table when he heard the front door. Jasper came in the way. He always came in backpack half open, narrating something quietly to himself. He appeared in the kitchen doorway, looked at the box, looked at his father, and decided not to push it. He went to the refrigerator and stood in front of it for a long time considering his options. "There's leftover pasta," Cormac said. "I know," Jasper said. He closed the refrigerator and went to find it, and Cormac sat at the kitchen table in the quiet and thought about what came next. Wendell Price understood, better than most, that problems left untended did not resolve themselves. They accumulated. The difference between a manageable situation and a career-ending one was almost always timing how early you moved, how cleanly you could control what was visible and what was not. He made calls the day after Britta Voss's second visit to the Carver Club. The first went to a contact in the commercial maintenance network, who occasionally subcontracted work to independent technicians in Nashville. Price asked, indirectly, whether Cormac Slade was properly licensed and insured. The contact called back 90 minutes later. Slade held a valid Tennessee HVAC contractor's license, with full commercial liability coverage. No complaints on record. No lapses. The second call went to a lawyer Price had used before for contract disputes. He asked whether a subcontractor who had worked a single job 2 years ago could be held to a confidentiality clause if they discussed that job with a third party. The lawyer asked to see the original contract. Price told him he would send it. He was composing that email when a text arrived from a number he recognized as belonging to the lobby desk, the old handset Dottie Crane used on the days she didn't want things routed through the main system. 6 words. "He knows you're looking into him." Price read the message twice. He set the phone face down on his desk and sat very still. Cormac read the same text, standing in the parking lot of a hardware supplier on Murfreesboro Pike. He read it twice, then called a number he had not dialed in 2 years. Ruth Albrecht had been the attorney for Slade Engineering from its founding through its dissolution. She was methodical and direct, and had the particular quality of never sounding alarmed, which Cormac had always found useful in someone whose job involved bad news. He explained the situation plainly: the report, the rejection email, the contract renewal process, Price's calls to the maintenance network. "Do you have the original subcontract from 2022? She asked. "Yes." "Does it contain a confidentiality clause?" He thought back. "No." "Standard single service agreement." "I've got a copy. Send it today," she said. "Print the texts. Back up the email. Don't delete anything." A pause. Cormac. "They're scared." That same afternoon, Britta opened a document her internal audit team had sent 3 hours earlier, a discrepancy report from the Carver Club's maintenance billing records. She read through it methodically, page by page, until she reached a line on page 3, a work order for HVAC servicing, dated November 2022, 1 month after the gala billed by a company called Meridian Technical Services, LLC, $8,400. The description read, "Full system inspection and certification, pressure components." The work order was signed off by Wendell Price as reviewed and approved. Meridian Technical Services, LLC, had dissolved its Tennessee registration in January 2023. Its registered agent had been a post office box. There was no corresponding technical report, no inspector certification number, no technician signature. She called Dottie. "The November inspection after the gala," Britta said. "A crew coming in for HVAC work. Do you remember?" "No," Dottie said. "I was here every day that month. No one came." That night in her hotel room in the Gulch, Britta sat at the desk with the laptop open long after she should have closed it. $8,400. A company that no longer existed, Price's signature on the approval. She opened a browser and searched. Slade Engineering, Nashville, Tennessee. She found the Engineering Association profile, a headshot that was several years old, a list of completed projects, commercial climate systems, structural HVAC design, 3 hospital contracts spanning nearly a decade. She read through it twice. She looked at the phone. She typed in his number. She held it for a long moment. Then she set it on the desk and sat in the dark, thinking about a man who had built something carefully, and then walked away from it. And she did not yet know why, but she understood in the way that you sometimes understand things before you have words for them, that the answer was connected to everything else. In the morning, she did not go back to Chicago. Cormac was at a commercial kitchen retrofit in Bellevue when his phone buzzed. He stepped outside and called back. Britta answered before the second ring. "I'm still in Nashville. Can we meet?" 6 blocks from the club. Coffee shop on 8th Avenue. When he walked in, she was at a corner table near the window, laptop open, a cup that had been there a while. She looked up when he came through the door, and something in her expression, carefully maintained, shifted slightly. She turned the laptop toward him without preamble. A company called Meridian Technical Services billed for a full system inspection 1 month after the gala. $8,400. No technician report. No certification number. The company dissolved in January 2023. He looked at the screen. Someone billed for work that wasn't done. Price signed off on it. A pause. "I need to ask you something directly. Did you ever see Price's name in any of the documentation from 2022? Anything legal? Anything contractual?" Cormac took out his phone. He opened the photos and found the image of the email. He turned the screen toward her. She read it carefully. The date. The language. Price's full name at the bottom. "There's something else," she said. She opened another window. "The version of your report that went into the Carver Club's official archive, the version that has been in their records for 2 years, doesn't have your name on it. The signature line reads, R. Mercer, Meridian Technical Services." Cormac went still. "He replaced your name," she said, "with a technician from a company that doesn't exist, which means he could bill for phantom work and attribute it to someone who couldn't be questioned because the company is gone and the person is fictional." He understood the mechanism immediately. It was not complicated. He was protecting a supplier relationship. If I replaced the valve assembly with a different unit, the kickback arrangement changed. He needed my recommendation to disappear. He paused. "And he needed me to disappear with it." "Yes," she said. He looked out the window at the street, a delivery truck at the corner. An ordinary Tuesday moving at its ordinary pace. "So I fixed the system," he said finally. "Saved the gala. And they deleted me." "Not Voss Meridian," she said. "Price." "I know," he said quietly. "I wasn't talking about you." She held his gaze. "I need you to understand that." "I do." The silence between them settled differently than the ones before it. "Before I make any decision about this contract," she said, "I need to know what you want from all of this. You have documentation. You have standing. There are things you could pursue." Cormac looked at the table, then out the window. He was quiet long enough that she didn't rush him, which he noticed. "I don't want money," he said. "I don't want to sue anybody." He stopped, started again. If something had gone wrong after that gala, if the system failed again, if someone got hurt and someone pulled the record, they would have seen a clean inspection from a company that didn't exist. They would have seen my name wasn't there. They would have thought no one had looked at it. He met her eyes. "I want the record right. Not because of my reputation, because if someone ever needs to know what happened in that basement, I want there to be an answer that's actually true." She looked at him for a long moment without speaking. Then she said, "I was on stage that night. The gala. Standing at the podium when the temperature started climbing. Someone told me the system was being handled, and I went back to the microphone. I didn't ask who. I just accepted it and kept going." She paused. "I didn't know your name. I didn't know it was one person, alone, in the basement, for 4 hours. I found that out 2 weeks ago, when I pulled the archive." He was very still. "I'm not telling you that to ask for anything," she said. "I'm telling you because you're owed the truth." He looked at her for a moment. "So you were up there smiling at 300 people. And I was in the basement. Yes. And now you're sitting here. I am, she said. And I can't change the order of events. But I can be honest about what they were. He held her gaze. Then, quietly. Okay. She wasn't certain what he meant exactly. But something had opened somewhere, and they both knew it. She asked about the ring, his right hand. He met her eyes. Her name was Dana, he said. She was a teacher. She died in March 2019. Car accident. Britta did not say she was sorry the way people reflexively do. She looked at him with the steadiness of someone who was actually present. I couldn't go back to the office after, he said. I tried for about 3 months. It didn't take. A pause. HVAC felt cleaner. You go in. You find what's wrong. You fix it. It either works or it doesn't. Nobody asks how you're holding up. She nodded slowly. For a moment, the coffee shop was just a quiet room on a Tuesday, and neither of them needed to be anywhere else. Price found out about the second meeting through proximity and attention. A staff member recognized Britta, walking toward 8th Avenue, and mentioned it offhandedly to someone, who passed it to someone else, who said something to Price while he was reviewing the week's booking schedule. He did not react outwardly. He waited until he was alone, then called the club's legal counsel. 2 days later, a formal letter arrived at Cormac's home address. The law firm alleged that he had violated a confidentiality agreement from his 2022 subcontract by sharing proprietary maintenance information with a third party. It demanded he cease further communication regarding club operations and threatened injunctive relief if he did not comply. He read it at the kitchen table while Jasper was at school. Then he called Ruth. "Read it to me," she said. He did. When he finished, she was quiet for 4 seconds. "There is no confidentiality clause in the 2022 contract. I have reviewed it. This letter is based on a provision that does not exist in the document they signed. They're banking on me not knowing that." "Yes," Ruth said. "I'll draft a response today. We'll put it in writing that the contract has been reviewed by counsel and contains no such provision, and that any further correspondence of this nature will be forwarded to the Tennessee Bar for review." A pause. "They're scared. This is what scared looks like." He texted Britta a photo of the letter without comment. She called back within 8 minutes. "I'm calling my general counsel," she said. "Ruth's handling it on my end. The clause doesn't exist." "I know it doesn't." A pause. "Are you all right?" He considered it. "Yes," he said. "I've been through worse paperwork." She almost laughed. He could hear it in the brief pause before she composed herself. "I'll be in touch," she said. That evening, Dottie Crane called a notary she had used before and scheduled an appointment for the following morning. She had been thinking about this for 2 days, not anxiously, but steadily, the way she approached most things. She had worked at the Carver Club for 7 years and kept her head down and done her job with care. But she had come to understand, over those 7 years, that there was a difference between a place running smoothly and a place running cleanly, and that the difference mattered. At 9 in the morning on a Thursday, she sat across from the notary on West End Avenue and gave a sworn statement. She confirmed that on the night of October 14th, 2022, she had personally logged Cormac Slade's arrival at the club at 10:15 p.m. She confirmed that Wendell Price had directed her, in the week following, not to include the subcontractor's name in the official vendor log for that evening. She had complied at the time, believing it to be a minor administrative decision. She understood now that it was not. She signed. The notary stamped it. She called Cormac from the parking lot outside. "I've been holding on to this too long," she said when he answered. He was quiet for a moment. "Dottie, it needed to be done," she said. "That's all." She said it the way she said most things, plainly, without expectation of a particular response. She emailed the scanned document to both Cormac and Britta that afternoon. Then, she went back to work. The next morning, Britta drove to the Carver Club alone. She walked through the main entrance, nodded to the desk, and went up to the 3rd floor. She opened Price's door, without knocking. He was at his desk. He looked up. She set 2 folders on the surface in front of him and did not sit down. "The first file is the complete audit report," she said. "The billing discrepancies, the phantom work order, the original technical report with the altered signature, Dottie Crane's notarized statement, and the email in which you rejected the pressure valve recommendation in your own name." Price's face had gone very still. "The second file is the letter your legal team sent to Cormac Slade, citing a confidentiality clause that does not exist in his contract." She held his gaze without expression. "Both files are going to the board of directors on Monday. I wanted you to know before they did." She picked up the folders. "Voss Meridian will not be renewing the contract with the Carver Club," she said. "Not under current management." She walked out. The board of directors of the Carver Club convened an emergency session on Monday morning, as promised. Britta presented the materials in the order she had compiled them, which was also the order of increasing severity. She began with the billing discrepancy, $8,400 billed to a dissolved entity with no corresponding technical documentation. She moved to the original subcontractor report from October 2022 and the version currently in the club's official archive, placing both side by side on the conference table so the board could see exactly what had been changed and where. Then came the email. Price's rejection of the pressure valve recommendation, in writing, 5 days after the gala, under his full name and title. Then Dottie's statement. The board members had the carefully composed faces of people accustomed to difficult meetings. But by the time Britta set down Dottie's statement, 3 of them had stopped taking notes and were simply watching her. She answered 3 questions. She thanked them for their time and gathered her materials and left the room. In the lobby downstairs, Cormac Slade was standing near the main entrance with his hands in his jacket pockets. He had not been invited to the meeting. Dottie had sent him the time and room number the night before, with one additional line. "You should be there when it ends." He looked up when Britta came through the door. "Done," he said. "Done," she said. He nodded. Something in his face was not quite what she'd expected. Not satisfaction, not vindication. Quieter than either of those things. "The board will suspend Price pending a full internal review," she said. "The financial irregularities are substantial enough that this will go well beyond the club. His legal exposure is significant, and the report, the technical record from October 2022, will be corrected officially. Your name restored as technician of record." The board agreed to send a written apology. A pause. "They agreed before I even finished asking." He looked at her. The quiet thing in his face settled into something she couldn't quite name. "Okay," he said. "Cormac." She held his gaze. "Voss Meridian needs a technical systems consultant for 3 new venue openings. I'm not looking for an HVAC contractor to fill that role. I'm looking for the person who wrote that report, the one who flagged a risk no one else caught, and documented it precisely enough that 2 years later it held up under every form of scrutiny I could apply to it." She let that sit for a moment. "I'd like you to submit a formal file." He looked at her for a long moment. "Can I send you my CV?" For the first time in all the days she had known his name, Britta Voss smiled. "You already did," she said. In October of 2022, 6 weeks later, the Carver Club's main lobby looked the same as it always had, the same dark wood paneling, the same bronze light fixtures, the same leather chairs arranged near the windows. But the energy of the place had shifted in the way buildings shift when the people who have shaped them are no longer present. Wendell Price's name was off the operations directory. The office on the 3rd floor had been cleared and was being prepared for his replacement. Dottie Crane had been named Interim Director of Operations, a title she accepted with the same composure she brought to everything, and which everyone who worked alongside her agreed was approximately 7 years overdue. Cormac stood in the center of the lobby with a clipboard, watching 2 technicians run calibration checks on the climate control system. He wore a navy polo shirt with the name of his company stitched on the left chest. Slade Technical Consulting, LLC, registered 3 weeks earlier. The structure was leaner than Slade Engineering had been, simpler overhead, narrower scope, and he found he didn't mind any of it. What he was doing felt right-sized for what he actually wanted to spend his days on. The work was different from what he had done before. More conversation before any tools came out. More sitting with architects and owners in rooms that still smelled of new construction, talking through what the drawings said a system should do versus what it would actually do once the building filled with people and weather and time. He was reasonably good at this, and the reason was not complicated. The years of working with his hands had given him a fluency in real systems that people who had only ever worked from blueprints did not have, and clients found that fluency worth paying for. One afternoon that week, he picked Jasper up from school. They drove home in the early dark. "What did you do today?" Jasper asked, because he always asked. He had decided somewhere around age 6 that this was an important question, and he had not wavered. Cormac thought about it. Fix something that should have been fixed a long time ago. Jasper considered this seriously. Like a pipe? More like a record. Jasper looked at him with the expression of an 8-year-old who has decided a follow-up question would not be interesting. He turned back to the window. Outside, the streetlights were coming on one by one down the length of the block. "Can we have the pasta tonight?" "Sure," Cormac said. That evening, after Jasper was asleep, Britta called from Chicago. It was not about the venue contracts, and he knew that from the first word she said, which was simply his name. They talked for a long time, about Nashville and Chicago, and the particular quality of each city at a certain hour on a winter night. About the kind of buildings each of them had spent their careers inside, and what it felt like to stand in them when everyone else had gone home. About Dana, a little not enough to be heavy, just enough to be honest. About the way certain things in a person's life look one way from the outside and entirely another from within, and how rarely anyone thinks to ask which angle they're standing at. He was still on the phone at 11:30, sitting at his kitchen table in the dark with a cold cup of coffee in front of him, which was exactly where he had been the night she had called for the first time. On Saturday morning, the Carver Club was quiet. The week's events were done, the staff lighter on weekends, the lobby still in the particular way that high-ceilinged rooms go still when no one has come through the doors yet. Cormac let himself in through the main entrance, the same entrance he had walked toward and not through on the first morning, before any of this had started. He was there to do a final walkthrough before the full handover of the technical audit. One last look at the system readings. One last conversation with the crew lead. One last signature on the documentation binder that would transfer the record cleanly from one management to the next. He had been inside perhaps 20 minutes when he heard the main door open. He turned. Britta walked in from the morning light, no blazer this time, just a coat, hair down, a coffee from somewhere down the street. She looked around the lobby slowly, the way someone looks when they are confirming something they have already decided. "I took the first flight," she said. He looked at her in the light coming through the tall front windows, the kind of winter light that is sharp and unhurried and makes everything in a room look like it is exactly where it belongs. He crossed the lobby and stood beside her. Neither of them said anything. Outside, the street was beginning its slow Saturday accumulation, a delivery van, a jogger moving at an easy pace, a woman walking with her hands in her pockets against the cold. Britta rested her hand on the railing beside his, not gripping it, just resting it there, in the quiet of the room, in the light of the morning. He did not move. Neither did she. Some things get erased from the record but never from the room. They just wait for the right person to read them back.